Imagine Europe in the summer of 1914. It was not a peaceful place. It was more like a playground full of proud and suspicious rivals. The big countries were all competing with each other. They wanted to have the biggest armies. They wanted the most powerful navies. They wanted to control land and resources all over the world, building vast empires that stretched across continents. This competition created a lot of tension. Everyone was watching everyone else, wondering what their next move would be. It was a time of great pride, but also great fear. A small argument could easily turn into a big fight. These powerful nations formed teams like gangs in a schoolyard. These teams were called alliances. They were promises to help each other in case of a war. On one side was the Triple Alliance, which included Germany, Austria-Hungary and Italy. On the other side was the Triple Entente, a friendship between France, Russia and Great Britain. These alliances were supposed to keep the peace. The idea was that no country would dare attack another if it meant fighting its friends too. But these agreements did the opposite. They created a giant web connecting everyone's fate. A problem between two countries could now pull everyone else into the conflict. The Austro-Hungarian Empire was a major player in this tense environment. It was a huge old empire made up of many different groups of people. Many of these groups, like the Serbs, Czechs and Croats, did not want to be ruled by Austria-Hungary. They wanted to have their own independent countries. This was especially true in a region called the Balkans in southeastern Europe. This area was known as the powder keg of Europe. It was filled with nationalist anger and was seen as a place where a small spark could cause a massive explosion that would set the whole continent ablaze. This is the world we find ourselves in on that fateful day in 1914. It was a continent armed to the teeth, divided by suspicion and bound by dangerous promises. The great powers of Europe were like sleepwalkers, stumbling towards a cliff in the dark, not fully understanding the danger they were in. They believed their armies and their alliances made them safe. In reality, these very things made the situation incredibly fragile. All it would take was one single dramatic event to push everyone over the edge and into a war unlike any the world had ever seen before. Into this tense world steps Archduke Franz Ferdinand. He was the heir to the throne of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. This meant that one day he would be the emperor. He was a very important and powerful figure. In June 1914, he decided to visit a city called Sarajevo. Sarajevo was the capital of Bosnia, a region that Austria-Hungary had taken over just a few years earlier, in 1908. Many people in Bosnia, especially the Serbs who lived there, were very unhappy about this. They did not want to be part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. They wanted to be part of their neighbor, the independent Kingdom of Serbia. This visit was seen as a provocation by some. It was like the empire was showing off its control. For a group of young Serbian nationalists, this was an opportunity they could not miss. They were part of a secret society called the Black Hand. Their goal was simple and brutal: to free their people from Austro-Hungarian rule, using violence if necessary. They believed that by killing a symbol of the empire, they could inspire their people to rise up. They were young, passionate and willing to die for their cause. They saw Franz Ferdinand not just as a man, but as the living embodiment of the oppression they hated. The man who would pull the trigger was a 19-year-old named Gavrilo Princip. He was a Bosnian Serb. He was a student who had been driven by a burning desire for his people's freedom. Princip and his fellow conspirators were not professional soldiers. They were a small group of determined young men. They were provided with pistols and bombs by the Black Hand. They planned to attack the Archduke's car as it drove through the streets of Sarajevo on June 28th. This date was deliberately chosen. It was a special day for Serbian nationalists, a day of historical significance, making the planned act even more symbolic. So the stage was set for a collision between the old power of an empire and the new, fiery force of nationalism. The Archduke and his wife, Sophie, travelled to Sarajevo knowing there was some risk, but they likely did not understand the depth of the hatred waiting for them. They were symbols of an old order. Gavrilo Princip and his friends were symbols of a new revolutionary anger that was sweeping across the Balkans. Their paths were about to cross in a way that would change the course of history forever, setting in motion a chain of events far beyond what any of them could have possibly imagined. On the morning of June 28, 1914, The streets of Sarajevo were lined with crowds. Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife Sophie were riding in an open-topped car. They were smiling and waving to the people. The 7 young assassins from the Black Hand had spread out along the planned route. They were waiting for their moment to strike. As the motorcade passed by the first conspirator, he failed to act. The second conspirator, a man named Nedeljko Kabrinovic, was more decisive. He threw his bomb towards the Archduke's car, but he missed his target. The bomb bounced off the back of the Archduke's vehicle. It rolled under the car following behind and exploded. The explosion injured several officers and some people in the crowd, but Franz Ferdinand and Sophie were unharmed. The convoy sped away from the chaos. Kabrinovic swallowed a cyanide pill, which failed to kill him, and jumped into the shallow river, where he was quickly captured by the police. The other assassins, including Gavrilo Princip, saw the speeding cars and the commotion. They believed the plot had failed completely. The chance was lost, and they began to melt back into the crowds, disappointed and defeated. Franz Ferdinand decided to continue with his planned visit to the town hall. After giving a speech there, he made a fateful decision. He wanted to visit the officers who had been injured by the bomb in the hospital. His driver was not properly informed of the change of plans. The driver followed the original route, which would have taken them through the narrow streets of the old city. As the car turned onto a side street, an official realized the mistake. He shouted at the driver to stop and go back. The driver slammed on the brakes, and the large car stalled right in the middle of the street. By an incredible twist of fate, the car had stopped directly in front of the cafe where Gavrilo Princip was standing. He had gone there after believing the assassination had failed. He could not believe his eyes. There, less than 2 meters away, was his target, sitting perfectly still in the open car. Princip did not hesitate. He stepped forward, raised his pistol, and fired 2 shots. The first bullet hit Sophie in the stomach. The second hit the Archduke in the neck. The attack that had failed so spectacularly just an hour before had now succeeded because of a simple wrong turn. The shots fired by Gavrilo Princip echoed far beyond Sarajevo. Austria-Hungary was outraged. They saw the assassination not as the act of a few young men, but as a direct attack planned by their troublesome neighbor Serbia. They decided to use this crisis as an excuse to crush Serbia once and for all. A month after the assassination, on July 23, 1914, Austria-Hungary sent Serbia a list of 10 impossible demands. This was known as the July Ultimatum. Serbia agreed to almost all of them, but it was not enough. Austria-Hungary wanted war, and on July 28th, it officially declared war on Serbia. This is where the dangerous web of alliances came into play. Russia saw itself as the protector of the Slavic people, including the Serbs. It could not stand by and watch Serbia be crushed, so Russia began to mobilize its massive army to support Serbia. Germany, Austria-Hungary's main ally, saw Russia's mobilization as a direct threat. Germany had a plan, the Schlieffen Plan, which required it to act quickly. On August 1st, Germany declared war on Russia. The first domino had knocked over the second, and now the whole line was beginning to tremble and fall. The situation escalated rapidly. France was Russia's ally. Germany knew that a war with Russia meant a war with France too. Following its war plan, Germany declared war on France on August 3rd. To attack France quickly, the German army needed to march through neutral Belgium. When Germany invaded Belgium, Great Britain, which had promised to protect Belgian neutrality, had no choice. On August 4th, Great Britain declared war on Germany. In just a few short weeks, a regional dispute in the Balkans had exploded into a full-scale European war. The shot in Sarajevo was the spark that lit the fuse. The complex rivalries, the massive armies, and the rigid alliance systems were the powder keg. What started with a nationalist's pistol in a small city had dragged the great powers of the world into a catastrophic conflict. The dominoes had fallen one after another until the whole continent was at war. This war, which people thought would be over by Christmas, became known as the Great War, or World War I. It would last for 4 years and change the world forever, all because of one fateful day in Sarajevo.